On the Jersey Magazine this morning, just a few days ago, I had Brian Bergen reach out to me. Brian is an assemblyman from Denville in the 25th district here in New Jersey. And he said, you need to speak with this woman. And I looked and I thought, you know what? Brian's absolutely right. Lisa Jaster, good morning and welcome to WDHA.
Good morning, Jim, and thanks for having me.
You have a fascinating story to tell. You've just written a new book called Delete the Adjective. And I won't go through the adjectives yet that you deleted, but it's a soldier's adventure in Ranger School. You have an extremely interesting story to tell with regard to a Ranger School. Tell our listeners about that.
I guess the short version, Jim, if there is a short version, is that Ranger School is a leadership course. It's considered one of the Army's and really one of the world's premier leadership schools to attend. People come from all over the world, every branch of service, to attend Army Ranger School. And it's been open since the 1950s. My father went in 1968 before going to Vietnam, and it was never open to women. In 2015, a few of us had an opportunity to go. We had to be willing to go to a preschool, get screened, and then actually attend. 19 of us started. I happened to be 37 at the time. The average age is 22 for the guys that attend. And although 19 of us started, only 3 of us ultimately graduated from that first integrated course. And it was a really neat experience for a lot of reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into. But one of them was that, 40 plus years, 50 plus years later or earlier, my father had gone through the same routes, the same obstacle courses, probably the same barracks based on the conditions the facility was in.
What kind of advice did he give you?
No matter what happens, just stay focused on the prize.
Now, you'd been in the military. You had served tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. You left the military for, I believe it's 5 years.
That's correct.
Before you decided to go back. What was the impetus for going back?
I actually had a West Point grad reach out to me via social media saying, hey, we have what's called an IMA position. Those are individual mobilization augmentees. So they're people that plug holes in the military. And they had a position open that they needed a specialty for. And she said, hey, I know you loved the military and you got out for a lot of good reasons, but what do you think about coming back in? And it took a couple of years, actually, to get me back into military service. But 5 years after leaving active duty, I came in as a reservist because basically somebody reached out over social media.
You mentioned that your dad had been in the Army and had gone to Ranger School. How long of a history of military service do you have in your family?
It's not incredibly long because I think my great-grandparents came as Polish immigrants. So my grandfather was Army Air Corps before there was a Air Force. Back in World War II, he was a navigator. And then my father was a Vietnam armor officer.
And when you first decided to go into the military, what was your thought process for that, Lisa?
It sounded hard. And that's the short answer. The long answer, of course, could get very long. But I was in 7th grade, 6th, 7th grade, when the first Gulf War started. And I saw those people on TV and I thought, well, these aren't actors. These are actual superheroes. These are people who are helping the Kuwaitis. They're going in, they're doing good things, not just for our nation, but for our world. And the whole nation was extremely patriotic back then. Early 90s, everybody had a flag on their front porch. And a little bit after that, my grandmother had sent me a book written by Carol Barkalow. And she's one of the first women to graduate from West Point in 1980. And it's called In the Men's House. And I read that book and I gobbled it up and I said, okay, so I want to be a superhero like these people on TV. And I really want to do something that's hard. I want to push myself. It sounds like West Point's the way to do that. And again, with my father being a West Point grad, my mother being extremely patriotic, my whole family being, small town Wisconsin, it just seemed like the right path. So in 7th grade, I said, I'm joining the Army and I'm doing it by going to West Point.
Lisa Jaster, I should point out, Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Jaster is my guest this morning here at 105.5 WDHA. Her new book is out, Delete the Adjective. And some of these adjectives that you delete on the cover: married, white, female. The one that really stood out for me was atypical, mother, and middle-aged. Why atypical?
Because I don't think that I'm that abnormal. Of course, everybody wants to think that they're somewhat normal. But as I start peeling the onion on some of my other friends, I live in a small town in Texas right now, and other women like to hunt and shoot and do non-typical female things, but they still like to cook dinner and look nice when they go out. So I don't want that to be one of my defining factors. And patriotism and outdoorsmanship, that's not only a masculine trait. So as a female, I don't want to be considered atypical, as well as all the other adjectives I want to erase.
And what led you to actually write the book?
So originally it was a series of little green notebooks. So I was taking notes in my pocketbook while at Ranger School to try to stay awake. And my kids were really young. Again, I said most of my peers were young men, 22, 23 years old, some younger. Like I actually had military issued duffel bags that had more time in service than these guys had had in their lives, like on this earth. And so they didn't have the same obligations at home. They didn't have a full-time job because remember, I was a reservist. I was doing this part-time. They didn't have a husband who was taking care of the kids by himself. They didn't have two small kids that were without a mother for an extended period of time. So I was taking notes to be able to explain my time away to the kids whenever they were old enough to start asking questions. And that was 2015, of course, when I graduated. And those notebooks just kind of sat on the shelf. So I typed them up. At some point in time, I just slowly typed them up into something that the kids could maybe look at versus my half exhausted chicken scratch. And last year I got egged on by a couple of my coworkers, and they said, hey, this might be important for people other than you to hear. And the statement that really hit home for me is some people cannot be what they cannot see. So as much as I want to delete those adjectives, I also understand that some people can't. So the driving force behind this book is not only to have other atypical people see me and see, oh, well, if she can do it, maybe I can, but also have people from my father's generation or gentlemen who don't know someone like Lisa Jaster, who likes to hunt, who likes to fish, who likes to camp, who really, really wants to serve her country. I want to introduce those people to somebody like me because a lot of the biases I see against women in certain service positions is based on really, really true experiences. Their moms, their wives, their daughters don't want to do the stuff that I want to do. So they think that all women or all middle-aged moms are afraid of sleeping in the woods and not showering. That's kind of the driving factors.
Now, you're in the Army Reserve, which means that's not your full-time job. You do have a full-time job with Shell, if I'm not mistaken, correct, as a civil engineer?
So I was. So for 12 years, I worked with Shell. My background, I've got a master's in civil engineering. I did global construction management and contract management. And then I left a few years ago, worked for a small engineering firm as the director of civil engineering. But now I really found that draw. And part of it was writing this book, but into leadership and helping others kind of tackle the challenges that I've faced. So I do executive coaching and leadership development workshops and keynote speaking.
So I would think in the business world, it's just as difficult to delete an adjective as it is in the military world. Am I correct in that assumption?
I would say sometimes it's more challenging because the military, when I first joined, went to get up basic training, they cut off my hair. Everybody wore the exact same outfit. The military loves to make jokes, maybe behind closed doors, and I probably should leave them there, that we've had gender neutral bathrooms for as long as I've served because they're porta potties or a tree line. So there's a lot of things that have been deleted in the military that corporate America still needs to deal with. Because military, they break you down during basic training and they try to build you up as a team. So I would say deleting the adjective in corporate America has been even more complicated. And I'll give you a quick example because, I'd love to make short stories long. And that's when I worked for Shell. I did a lot of work offshore. Well, I would take a helicopter to these offshore platforms. And as my helicopter was landing, I would hear announcements like female on deck. And I could just imagine people scurrying around like cockroaches when the light gets turned on, trying to make it safe for women. And not that it was ever unsafe for women, but it's just that perception that the softer side of Sears is going to change the entire mentality of a platform or a work site.
Again, you were the first woman to graduate from the U.S. Army's Ranger School. What did you learn most about yourself in that process, Lisa?
Ooh, most about myself. I think it's that I'm not that much different. Like when I talk about deleting the adjective, being 37, I had the same intrinsic goals as those 22-year-old males that were to my left and right. Now, I was working at a different level as a major or a field grade officer in the Army. I was definitely senior to everyone around me, but we all just wanted to serve. And it really helped me as a leader to walk away understanding that service and patriotism and working for your battle buddy on your left and your right is still a driving force, whether you've been in the Army for 15 years or whether you've been in the Army for 5 months. And that really helped me also learn how to speak to not only my peers and my subordinates, but those senior to me once I went back into corporate America. So those were direct lessons learned for all aspects of my life.
The book is a very interesting read. Delete the Adjective, and you can find it at deletetheadjective.com. You can also follow Lisa on Twitter at Lisa_Jaster. Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Jaster, thank you so much for your time this morning here on the Jersey Magazine. I've enjoyed speaking with you.
Thanks for having me, Jim. I appreciate it.